All right, everyone, here we go with the notes for Chapter 8, talking about radio programming this time around. 3 videos for this chapter. This video will cover the first 4 sections of your notes. The FCC has neither the right nor the power to control radio programming in the United States. Radio stations are free to program their airtime however they want. Now, this is very different than what happens in other countries. We don't have the government telling us what we can and cannot run on radio stations as far as a content basis. They don't have rules on what format we can and cannot run, what types of information we can or cannot put on the air. Really, American radio is programmed to satisfy listener tastes and not, as opposed to some government-owned systems, to serve political or bureaucratic interests. And we call this situation format freedom. So when you have a license to operate a radio station in the United States, you are free to pretty much put on there whatever you want within certain decency guidelines. That's the only thing the FCC will hammer down on, is any rules that break those decency guidelines that they've put forth. The task is simple: to provide attractive programming to meet the informational and or the entertainment needs of an audience. Well, radio is in the business of attracting listeners for the sake of attracting advertisers, at least in terms of commercial radio. So if you have an audience that advertisers want to reach out to, then you've got a pretty good model to potentially have a good business, as well as providing an entertainment service for the listening public. Now, public stations, they must entertain and inform their listeners to an extent that justifies financial support from government agencies, foundations, business underwriters, and from the listeners themselves. So both commercial and non-commercial radio have a vested interest in doing their best to attract and keep listeners. Although in terms of commercial radio, the ultimate goal is to satisfy advertisers by satisfying listeners. And in public radio, the goal is to be able to maintain financial support coming in from various areas while providing news, entertainment, information that its listeners desire to receive. Internet stations and formats, as far as they go, they don't use the public's airwaves. Therefore, they are exempt from any restrictions that the FCC would put on them. FCC does not maintain jurisdiction over web-based content. Now, let's talk about radio programming and some of the different logistics that go on. Now, there's basically 3 different types of programming sources that you're going to find on radio. The first one is going to be local programming. Local programming is original programming produced by the radio station in its studios or from locations in its immediate service area. This is the homegrown content. It's your local announcers, your local people that are involved in the creation of content for you to hear on that station. Pre-recorded or syndicated programming that is not locally sourced is program that's going to be obtained by the station from a commercial supplier, advertiser, or program producer. And again, these are from outside the station, usually from somewhere outside the local community as well. And these are going to be shows that air on multiple stations throughout the country. Many nationwide talk and music shows that are pre-recorded are going to be syndicated. So this covers various types of public affairs programming that is not produced locally at the radio station. It's going to encompass certain music shows like American Top 40 and various talk shows that don't have a live element to them by and large. Network programming, that is regularly scheduled type of programming. In other words, it's pretty much run at the same time every day at every station on the network. Generally, it is just picked up live from satellite. Most traditional national talk shows are network programs. So your Glenn Becks, your Sean Hannity's, your Dave Ramsey's, and all of those guys, those are going to be provided by satellite network services. As far as music goes, shows produced by local radio stations featuring local artists or national artists touring in their community. That would be the local stuff that is created. A lot of your live in-studio performances would fall into this category, whether it's a local band or a national artist that comes into the station to do an interview and play a couple of songs. Pre-recorded music, of course, this would be the stuff that you can pull off the shelf and put on the air, or pull off the computer file and put on the air, if you will. Network broadcasts of live concerts, also a source of music. And syndicated music programming, again, shows like American Top 40, various countdown shows, and the like. As far as news and talk are concerned, local content would be comprised of local news, sports, weather, and traffic reports. Local talk can be things that cover various issues, the political aspect of things, the civil, the medical, financial information shows. And of course, each of those have syndicated and national counterparts to them. One thing that's of note, news and talk stations tend to have the largest staffs in radio because not only do you have the hosts and the anchors, but you also have reporters and producers and technicians all involved in keeping content going on the station. Very rarely are you going to have just one person at a news station or a talk station. If you're a talk show host, you are most likely not running your own board to maintain the programming. There's just a lot of moving elements that would be hard to keep up for one person. There are places that do it, but it's really tough. So generally, you're going to have at least the host and a producer, where it might be a little easier for a announcer on a music station to do a combo operation, to be the talent and to run his or her own board. Syndicated and network radio are combining into similar services. So we talk about them as they're two distinct different things, but there is a lot of merging in terms of the delivery methods, in terms of the way that they operate, because both of them really do provide programming to multiple stations across the country. And you can take a network show from satellite and record it and play it back later. You don't necessarily have to play it back live. Syndicated programming, many of them are teaming up with satellite delivery providers to be able to do live delivery of programs while not formally being considered a network in and of themselves. So it is easy to confuse the two, and sometimes they kind of act as both entities at the same time. One example in the news talk realm is Rush Limbaugh. He helped to revitalize AM radio with his brand of conservative talk, kind of combining the talk format with a bit of shock jock sort of appeal. And because of Rush and a lot of people like him, talk radio became a leading format in many of the top 25 radio markets, while also helping a lot of stations on the AM band really come back into a certain amount of viability from a financial standpoint. Some modes of radio production. There is live and local production, when radio stations employ their own announcers or newscasters locally and play music that they themselves own, which we don't necessarily think of radio stations owning their own stuff, but it is possible. Well, especially if you're a station that focuses on the local flavor of things, and you have artists that come in, perhaps they do recordings at the radio studio. All of that can be locally sourced content that they put out on the air, and just 100% focused on the community. More than likely, though, you're going to have a situation where, at the very least, you have what is considered live assist production. Now, this occurs when radio managers use limited automation or syndicated programming, but retain local announcers and DJs as the backbone of their programming schedule. This can be a mix of syndicated features mixed in with local programming content, and mixing up with music from various different sources, and they combine all those things together to create their programming format. And then there is full studio automation. This refers to fully automated radio stations that take on one of two forms. It can either be completely automated by virtue of content all coming in from satellite delivery. So in the news talk realm, all of the talk would be stuff that is network or syndicated released and sent in via satellite. It can also mean that the station is automated by means of an automation system using hard drives, digital cart machines. So instead of having a live announcer in the studio, a program director would use a computer program to prepare the logs, schedule all the music, information, commercial elements, every little detail of what happens during the broadcast day would be programmed, and a computer would handle everything. And more stations are moving towards that sort of programming. So those are the main different ways. Now, within the automation aspect, and even within the live assist aspect of programming, you have an idea called voice tracking. And what voice tracking does is, with the help of automation software, a jock can record all of the intros and outros, the songs, along with any additional banter for an entire air shift. It's not unusual for a jock to have a 5-hour air shift that they record for and lay down all the things that he or she is going to say throughout that evening. And it maybe takes the course of an hour. Maybe they're recording 4 different announcements to be played through an hour and inserting those into the program log for later on in that day or for the next day. And if you know what you're doing and you are thinking ahead about what you're going to say, it doesn't take a long time at all. Creating the radio format. The format is the overall sound and image of the radio station. It's a comprehensive approach to programming. So we tend to think of the format as basically just what kind of music they play, or that instead of doing music, they do news programming or talk programming. And that's a huge part of it. But at the same time, the format is also in the way that they execute the particular flavor of content that they're putting out on the station. So it's the way that the announcers interact with the audience. It's the way the sweepers and bumpers sound, the little zingers that tell you who the station identification, who the station is, I should say. How the legal IDs sound, how tight the elements are, if you hear audio overlapping each other, or if it's a little more laid back and not quite as fast paced and that sort of thing. All of that plays into a station's format. 3 keys to a successful format. First off, to identify and serve a predetermined set of listeners. In other words, who is your audience. Determine who your audience is and meet them where they are at. Give them what they want. And not only that, but to serve those listeners better than the competition does. Give them a reason to stick with your station and not the other station across town. Thirdly, to reward those listeners, both on and off the air, so that they become consistent customers for the products and services advertised on the station. Because again, at least in terms of a commercial radio station, the ultimate folks that the station wants to keep happy are the advertisers, so that they continue to buy advertising, so the station continues to make money. We will continue on with Section 5 of the notes when you join me for Part B of Chapter 8.